The room was cold and smelled faintly of old carpet and ink from the printer in the corner, but it wasn't the temperature or the stale air that made Isaiah Thompson's hands tremble. It was the silence before the storm, the thick quiet that blanketed the courtroom just before the judge opened his mouth. The teen sat at the defendant's table, his back straight but his stomach in knots. The oversized jacket he wore had once belonged to his uncle, and it hung loosely on his slim frame. His sneakers were clean, though slightly worn, and he held a manila folder filled with handwritten notes and printed case law he'd spent the past week studying under the flickering library lights. He had no lawyer. No father beside him. No mother in the gallery. Just him, a borrowed suit, and a head full of arguments he wasn't sure anyone would listen to. Case number 28317. The State versus Isaiah Thompson, the clerk announced. The judge looked up, an older white man with a permanent frown etched into his face, like someone who forgot how to smile sometime around 1982. Isaiah Thompson, he said, his voice dry. Yes, Your Honor, Isaiah replied, standing. Representing yourself? Yes, sir, Isaiah said, trying to keep his voice from cracking. The judge leaned back in his chair, looked Isaiah up and down, then chuckled. It was short, dismissive, almost like a snort. Son, do you even know what due process means? There was laughter in the courtroom, quiet, but sharp enough to cut. Isaiah stood still, blinking. Yes, Your Honor. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution guarantees, don't recite to me what you found on Google, the judge interrupted. Sit down. We'll move this along quickly. Isaiah sat, jaw clenched. He felt the heat in his cheeks rise, not from shame, but from something else. Anger. Not at the judge's words exactly, but at the ease with which people dismissed him. Like his presence in this room made no sense. Like his mind was invisible. Like his voice didn't matter. He glanced over at the prosecuting attorney, a bored-looking woman reviewing her notes, then back to the judge. This was more than a misunderstanding over a busted window. This was a war on assumptions. A young woman in the back row watched him carefully. Jenny Morales, a first-year law student doing court observation for a criminal procedure class, hadn't planned to stay long. But the way Isaiah had looked the judge in the eye told her there was something more to this case. Something electric under the surface. She didn't know yet how much he knew, or how far he was willing to go, but there was a fire in him she hadn't seen in most second-year law students, let alone a teenage defendant. What if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? What if every person in the room assumed you were guilty, not because of what you did, but because of what you looked like? What if your only weapon was your mind, and your only hope was to prove that truth could still matter? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The judge turned to the prosecutor. Let's hear the state's case. Isaiah sat still, hands clasped on the table in front of him. The prosecutor stood and began laying out her version of events. Isaiah had been found standing near a broken electronics store window in downtown Atlanta just after a break-in. There had been looting in the area. Someone matching his description, black male, hoodie, jeans, had been spotted running from the scene. Isaiah had no record, but he had no alibi either. The state asserts that Mr. Thompson was clearly present during the commission of the crime, she said, and while we cannot place him inside the store, his proximity and matching description make this more than coincidental. The judge nodded. Seems straightforward. Anything to add, Mr. Thompson? Isaiah stood slowly, heart pounding. He opened his folder, but didn't look down. He didn't need to. He'd rehearsed this moment for days. Your Honor, I understand how this looks. But presence near a crime is not proof of guilt. I was walking home from the library that evening. I had no idea what had happened until the police stopped me. The judge looked unimpressed. And what library were you coming from? The Auburn Avenue Research Library, Isaiah replied. They close at 9. I stayed until closing. I signed the sign-out sheet. It's on record. The judge tapped his pen against the bench. And your evidence? I filed a request to subpoena the security footage from the library and the store. The footage from the store shows someone taller than me, with different shoes. I included a printed still in my motion. He handed a printed image to the bailiff. The judge barely glanced at it. Even so, he said, the similarities are striking. You can't expect us to believe you just happened to be there. Isaiah nodded. I don't expect belief, Your Honor. I expect the presumption of innocence, and I expect the state to meet its burden of proof. There was a shift in the room. Not large, but enough. A small silence replaced the chuckling. Even the judge paused, briefly. Where'd you learn to talk like that? He muttered. The Constitution, Isaiah replied. Jenny, still seated in the back, exhaled slowly. She watched Isaiah collect his notes with care, watched him turn legal phrases into weapons, watched the room begin to wrestle with its own doubts. Later, as the court recessed and Isaiah stepped out into the hallway, Jenny followed. He sat on a bench, folder in his lap, eyes scanning the wall. You were good in there, she said. Isaiah turned, unsure how to respond. Thanks, he said. Not good enough, though. I'm Jenny. First year law. GSU. She held out her hand. He shook it cautiously. Isaiah. Where'd you learn that stuff? The case law. The objections. The library. Books. YouTube sometimes. She raised her eyebrows. That's impressive. I just don't like getting pushed around, Isaiah replied. Jenny looked at him carefully. You've got potential. Real potential. If you want help preparing, I've got access to resources. Professors. Study groups. Trial records. You shouldn't have to do this alone. Isaiah hesitated. For months, he'd operated in silence. Now someone was offering to join him, not out of pity, but out of respect. Okay, he said. But I lead. You back me up. She smiled. Deal. As they walked away from the courthouse together, Isaiah glanced once more at the doors behind them. They would be back. This wasn't over. Not even close. Something had started in that courtroom, a shift, a flicker, a spark. And Isaiah Thompson, the boy they laughed at, wasn't just defending his name. He was getting ready to change the game. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? South Atlanta didn't look like the places you saw in brochures or on the news unless something burned down or someone got shot. It wasn't always dangerous, not always loud or broken, but it carried a kind of weight that you didn't shake off, even when you left. The streets had names like McDaniel and Pryor, but to Isaiah Thompson, they just meant home. Rows of tired brick houses with chipped porches and screen doors that didn't quite close. Yards where kids played with flat basketballs, neighbors argued from stoops, and people struggled without apology. Isaiah didn't hate it, he understood it. The good and the bad. The quiet and the noise. His world was a mix of sacrifice, survival, and second chances, none of which came easily. His mother, April Thompson, worked nights at the regional hospital. She was the kind of woman who kept her chin high and her voice soft, not because she was weak, but because she believed composure was a weapon. She'd grown up 2 blocks over, raised Isaiah and his younger sister Layla alone after their father left when Isaiah was 9. There was no dramatic goodbye, no suitcase at the door. One morning he was gone, and the only thing he left behind was a set of law books from a criminal justice course he never finished. Isaiah didn't cry. He just waited for the man to return. When he didn't, Isaiah turned to those books, flipping through pages filled with words he didn't understand at first, words like precedent, habeas corpus, burden of proof. He started writing down definitions on notebook paper, not because anyone asked him to, but because something about them felt powerful, like armor. School was another story. At Booker T. Washington High, Isaiah kept his head down and his grades high, but even that didn't stop the looks or the labels. Teachers called him articulate like it was a surprise. Cops driving past stared too long. When he corrected a teacher once on a Supreme Court case during history class, he got detention for disrupting the flow of instruction. But at the library, especially the Auburn Avenue Research Library downtown, Isaiah found space to breathe. It became his second home. While other kids were out hanging on corners or chasing girls, Isaiah was inside reading trial transcripts or listening to court podcasts on an old set of headphones. Layla, only 11, used to tease him about it. "You studying to be a superhero or a lawyer?" she asked once, sitting cross-legged on their small living room couch. "Same thing," Isaiah replied. Layla was different, full of brightness, no matter how dark things got. She had a laugh that broke through silence like sunlight through clouds, and she never let Isaiah get too serious. She was the one who left sticky notes on his books that said things like "future judge" and "Layla's big bro, the genius." Isaiah kept them all. April worked double shifts to cover rent, utilities, and the groceries that never lasted the full month. She knew Isaiah stayed up late reading, but she didn't understand the full picture. She thought it was a phase. When she asked him why he didn't go outside more, Isaiah only shrugged. What could he say? That the world out there didn't feel safe. That he didn't trust people to see him as anything but a walking statistic. So he stayed inside, learning the rules of the game so he could one day break them apart and rebuild something better. Still, there were moments, small ones, that shaped him. Like when he watched his mom get yelled at by a hospital administrator over a scheduling mistake that wasn't her fault. He remembered the way she nodded, lips tight, eyes dry. She didn't argue. Didn't fight back. Just swallowed it. That stuck with him. Another time, a neighbor named Mr. Daniels got evicted. Isaiah helped him carry boxes to the curb. When he asked why, the old man said, "Just part of the system, boy. We're on the wrong side of it." That sentence rattled in Isaiah's head for weeks. What did it mean to be on the wrong side of the system? And more importantly, how did you get to the other side? He started writing little essays about fairness, law, and race, not for class, just for himself. In one, he wrote, "Justice shouldn't depend on how you look or how much money you got. Justice should be blind. But maybe she ain't blind. Maybe she just keeps her eyes closed for some people and wide open for others." One of his teachers, Ms. Kelly, found one of these pages when Isaiah left it behind after class. She pulled him aside. "You ever think about law school?" she asked. Isaiah laughed. "People like me don't go to law school." "That's funny," she said, "because I see someone who could teach half the teachers here a thing or two about the Constitution." He didn't respond, but that conversation lingered. At night, while Layla slept and April worked, Isaiah would pull out old court cases and study how arguments were formed, how words changed verdicts, how lawyers moved juries with logic and emotion. He watched hours of court videos, public trials, closing statements, even C-SPAN hearings. One night, while watching a video of a black lawyer arguing in front of the Supreme Court, Isaiah felt something shift inside him. Not inspiration exactly. More like recognition. Like watching a version of himself in another timeline. A reminder that possibility wasn't just for someone else, it might actually belong to him too. But possibility didn't put food on the table or fix broken systems. It didn't stop cops from treating him like a suspect or teachers from assuming he cheated on his essays. And it didn't stop a judge from laughing in his face. The courtroom wasn't just a place, it was a battlefield. One where people like him weren't expected to fight, let alone win. But Isaiah wasn't afraid of the battlefield. He'd already lived on one. When the police picked him up near that electronics store, he wasn't shocked. He'd been walking home from the library, earbuds in, hoodie up. He didn't see the flashing lights until they were on top of him. "Hands up," they yelled. "Turn around." He complied. Didn't speak. Didn't move too fast. He'd practiced this moment in his head so many times it felt rehearsed. When they asked what he was doing there, he told them. When they asked for ID, he gave it. They cuffed him anyway. Told him someone matching his description had been seen near the looting. He spent the night in a juvenile holding cell, concrete bed, flickering light, dried food on the floor. One officer tossed him a juice box and said, "Bet you think you're smart, huh?" Isaiah didn't answer. Because he knew the truth. Smart didn't matter in that moment. Not until you could prove it in the right room, with the right words, at the right time. And now, that time was coming. The court date had been set. He was told he could get a public defender if he waited a few weeks. But Isaiah didn't want to wait. He wanted to speak for himself. To show that even a kid from the South Side with no money and no father could stand in front of a judge and fight with facts, not fists. He spent every free hour at the library after school. Jenny Morales hadn't entered his life yet. He was alone then, truly alone. But in the silence of the library, in the hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of old pages, Isaiah found something most people never do. Purpose. He wasn't chasing innocence. He was chasing something bigger. Dignity. Power. The ability to defend not just himself, but others who never got the chance. Because deep down, Isaiah knew that this fight wasn't just about a broken window or a mistaken identity. It was about rewriting the story people told themselves when they saw someone like him in handcuffs. It was about turning that dismissive laugh in the courtroom into silence. Then maybe, if he did it right, into respect. And maybe one day, something even bigger than that. It started with a broken window and ended with handcuffs cold against his wrists. Isaiah hadn't meant to be anywhere near the scene. He'd stayed late at the Auburn Avenue Research Library, like he always did on Friday nights, soaking up case law and outlining trial arguments in the quiet corner behind the third row of legal texts. The library closed at 9. He left at 8:45, headphones in, backpack slung over one shoulder, walking the usual route back to the apartment he shared with his mom and Layla. But that night, he took a different turn. Just one block off his normal route. He wanted to stop by the gas station for a snack. He hadn't eaten since lunch, and he was craving something salty. He cut down Walton Street, not knowing that only minutes earlier, someone had thrown a brick through the window of a small electronics store and run off with 2 laptops. The cops were already nearby, patrolling heavy after a string of thefts in the area. All it took was one person to shout, "There he is," and point. Isaiah looked up from his phone, confused, heart hammering before he even realized what was happening. Then came the red and blue lights, the commands, the guns. "Hands on your head. Get down." He didn't argue. He didn't ask questions. He just dropped his backpack, raised his hands, and followed every instruction with robotic precision. 2 officers pushed him against the hood of the squad car and frisked him. "You match the description," one of them said. Black male, mid to late teens, gray hoodie, dark jeans. Isaiah opened his mouth to explain. He had just come from the library, he had proof, his library card was in his backpack, the checkout slip was time-stamped, but they weren't listening. "You can explain it at the station," one officer said. "For now, you're being detained for questioning." They didn't read him his rights. They didn't let him call his mom. He was 14 minutes from home, but it might as well have been 14 miles. The ride to the precinct felt like a bad dream, those ones where you try to run and your legs don't move, or you try to shout and your voice vanishes. Isaiah kept thinking, over and over, this is a mistake. This is going to get cleared up. But deep down, he wasn't sure. Because being a black teenager in Atlanta meant he was used to the tightrope of assumption and threat, guilt and survival. At the station, they took his fingerprints, snapped a mugshot, and placed him in a holding cell with two other boys who barely looked at him. The walls were cement gray, the toilet had no lid, and the overhead light buzzed like a mosquito. He sat on the edge of the cold bench, gripping the edge with white knuckles. He thought about his mother coming home to an empty apartment, Layla asking where he was. He wondered what story the police would tell her. Juvenile intake, someone muttered. Court date'll be in about a week. If no lawyer shows up, they'll assign one. I didn't do anything, Isaiah said. They've got the wrong person. The officer didn't even look up. Tell it to the judge. That phrase stuck with him. Tell it to the judge. Like facts didn't matter until you were standing in front of someone in a robe. Like innocence was irrelevant without legal backing. After 4 hours, they released him with a citation. No charges filed yet, but they would be if the prosecutor decided there was enough to go on. His court appearance was scheduled for the following Thursday. He walked home alone under streetlights, fingers still tingling from the pressure of the handcuffs. His mom was already at work. Layla was asleep. He sat on the couch, pulled off his hoodie, and stared at the ceiling until the sun started to rise. At school, he didn't say a word. When teachers asked him to participate, he declined. When friends asked if he was okay, he nodded and lied. But inside, something was growing, cold, sharp, determined. He skipped lunch and went back to the library. He needed to prepare. If no one else would believe him, he'd believe in himself. He asked the librarian if he could print records. He dug up footage from the store's address, discovered it had external cameras, and wrote down the name of the company listed on the storefront. He Googled how to file a subpoena. He didn't even know if a juvenile defendant could do that, but he was going to try. The more he read, the more he realized how few protections people like him had unless they spoke the language of the system. The legal terms were like keys, and he was building a ring of them, one by one. Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. 14th Amendment, due process and equal protection. Probable cause. Chain of custody. Burden of proof. He copied full case texts into a spiral notebook and rewrote them in his own words. He memorized a summary of Terry versus Ohio and Graham versus Florida. These weren't just words to him, they were lifelines. He practiced arguments in front of the mirror, watched how his face moved when he emphasized certain points. Your Honor, there is no physical evidence linking me to the scene. No stolen property. No eyewitness testimony identifying me with certainty. Presence in the vicinity does not equal guilt. His reflection stared back at him, calm and convincing. But he wasn't fooling himself. He knew the truth, this judge wasn't just going to listen to a teen with no lawyer and no pedigree. He would have to earn that attention, grab it, shake it loose from the claws of assumption. The week crawled by. He barely slept. On Wednesday night, he wrote out his notes one last time, then changed his mind and rewrote them again. He ironed the button-down shirt he wore for school pictures last year and borrowed a jacket from his neighbor, Mr. Samuels, who used to work security and still kept his uniforms pressed. The morning of court, he got up at 5, double-checked everything, ate half a granola bar, then left. It was overcast outside. Gray like the walls of the cell. Gray like the judge's hair. Gray like the doubt in his mind. When he walked into the courthouse, head high, shoes squeaking slightly on the tile, he felt every pair of eyes. He saw the whispering in the corner, the security guard squinting at him. But he also saw Jenny Morales. He didn't know her name yet. He just saw the way she watched him, seriously, without mockery or sympathy. Like she was studying a rare phenomenon. The hearing itself was short, but unforgettable. When the judge laughed at him, something inside Isaiah clicked into place. Not shattered. Not broke. But locked. A core of steel, a switch that said you will not erase me. He knew then that no matter how ridiculous he looked to them, no matter how many smirks or interruptions or sideways glances he got, he had walked into that courtroom ready. The only question now was whether they were ready for him. Outside the courtroom, Jenny introduced herself. Isaiah was still raw, still chewing on the weight of what had happened, but when she offered help, he didn't hesitate. He couldn't afford pride. Not now. Not when the system was stacked this high and this wide. I've never seen anyone do what you just did, Jenny told him. You were better than most first years. He looked at her, searching for sarcasm, but found none. I don't need compliments, he said. I need strategy. She nodded. Then let's get to work. They sat together on a bench near the clerk's office. Isaiah pulled out his folder and began explaining what he'd found: library timestamps, store layout, footage request forms. Jenny's eyes widened as he spoke. You did all this yourself? No choice, he said simply. That was the beginning. Not of the case, that had already started. Not of the story, that was already in motion. But the beginning of something deeper. A partnership. A fight worth fighting. A path only Isaiah could walk, but no longer had to walk alone. Jenny took notes. Isaiah handed her copies. The two of them, side by side, plotting a defense that would become much more than just clearing a name. It would be about setting something right. About proving that the courtroom wasn't just a place where voices got silenced, but where truth could still speak, loud enough to make even a judge stop laughing. Jenny Morales hadn't expected to care. Courtroom observations were supposed to be a box to check, not something that gripped her chest and refused to let go. But the moment Isaiah opened his mouth and corrected the judge about burden of proof with precise constitutional language and steady eyes, Jenny felt the room shift, like gravity had tilted toward this boy no one else seemed to take seriously. She had seen defendants before, stumbling over their words, hunched with shame, sometimes angry, sometimes just lost, but Isaiah wasn't like that. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't apologizing. He was standing. Even when they tried to laugh him down. Especially then. When the judge dismissed him with that condescending smirk and half-chuckle, Jenny didn't laugh. She watched the boy's face, watched the twitch in his jaw and the way he forced his expression still. It wasn't pride. It was strategy. He wasn't just a teen fighting for his innocence, he was learning how to do it like a professional, like he already saw the cracks in the courtroom's walls and knew where to wedge the truth until it broke through. After the hearing, she followed him out into the hall, clutching her notebook, still unsure what she was doing. You were good in there, she said, and when he looked at her sideways, like waiting for the joke or the judgment, she added, I mean it. Really good. That's when he looked at her fully, eyes sharp, voice low. Thanks. But being good doesn't stop them from treating you like trash. She hesitated. No. It doesn't. But being good, and smart, makes it harder for them to keep doing it. That was the beginning. She introduced herself, mentioned GSU law, told him she had access to resources. Professors. LexisNexis. Criminal defense outlines. She wasn't offering pity. She was offering firepower. Isaiah didn't trust easily, she could tell. But he was smart enough to know that even the best warriors need allies. So when he said, okay. But I lead. You back me up, she didn't argue. She nodded. Deal. Over the next few days, they met at the library. Not Starbucks, not some student lounge, Isaiah insisted on Auburn Avenue. Said he needed to be near the books that started it all. Jenny showed up with her laptop and case briefs, Isaiah with his folder of handwritten notes and printed statutes. Their styles were different. Isaiah wrote in loops and arrows and highlighted key points like he was building a map. Jenny preferred outlines and bullet points. But they worked. Jenny showed him how to organize his arguments using the IRAC method: issue, rule, application, conclusion. Isaiah picked it up in 10 minutes. So, I present the issue, say, lack of direct evidence linking me to the scene, then I define the legal standard, apply the facts, and close the loop, he repeated. Got it. Jenny was stunned. You're absorbing this faster than most 2LS. He shrugged. It makes sense. It's logic. And it's fair, if people follow the rules. Jenny saw what he meant. It wasn't just about this case. It was about every moment Isaiah had been underestimated, ignored, accused, dismissed. He wasn't trying to win just for himself. He was trying to prove the whole system didn't own the truth. They spent 6 hours straight reviewing discovery materials. Jenny helped him draft a formal motion to obtain the store's external security footage. Isaiah insisted on writing every sentence himself. She just helped him format it. They looked up local procedures for requesting library attendance records. They practiced objections, reviewed comparable case precedents, and created a timeline of events down to the minute. Isaiah's biggest strength wasn't just memory, it was the way he thought. He anticipated counterarguments, poked holes in his own theories, revised everything. Jenny had never seen anyone work this hard without a grade hanging over them. She finally asked him why. Why he cared so much. Why he didn't just accept the free public defender. Because if I let them tell this story for me, he said, they'll write the ending too. And I'm not letting that happen. Jenny nodded. She understood more than he knew. Her father had been stopped in his truck once, pulled out without cause, accused of stealing his own cargo. It took months to clear it up. And even after, her dad said something she'd never forgotten: they don't have to prove anything. They just have to say you did it and hope you can't prove you didn't. That stuck with her. Watching Isaiah fight back against that very same system, not with anger but with precision, lit something up in her. Maybe this wasn't just an observation. Maybe this was why she came to law school in the first place. The next week, they returned to court. Isaiah wore the same borrowed jacket. Jenny sat in the gallery with her laptop. When the judge saw Isaiah again, he raised an eyebrow. Back again. Representing yourself still? Isaiah nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I've prepared a motion for the court's review. The judge sighed but gestured for the bailiff to collect it. Isaiah handed over the motion, typed, formatted, footnoted, and legally sound. This is a motion for evidentiary disclosure, Isaiah explained, requesting footage from the store's external security camera. I've included precedent establishing the right to obtain potentially exculpatory evidence under Brady v. Maryland, as well as Georgia-specific rules of criminal procedure. The judge skimmed the pages, then looked up. You wrote this? Yes, sir. No lawyer helped you? No, sir. The judge blinked, caught off guard for the first time. Motion granted. The prosecution is instructed to provide any and all requested footage by the next hearing. Jenny's hands tightened around her laptop. Isaiah didn't smile. Didn't gloat. He just nodded, as if this was the bare minimum he expected. After court, Isaiah exhaled for the first time in hours. Outside, Jenny met him near the steps. You crushed that motion, she said. That was textbook. Isaiah shook his head. It was survival. They walked back to the library. That night, they watched the footage. And there it was, clear as day. A figure taller than Isaiah, bulkier, with a limp Isaiah didn't have, sprinting away from the store moments after the window shattered. The face wasn't clear. But the shoes were, white, high-top Jordans. Isaiah wore black New Balances. He printed the frame, circled the shoes, noted the timestamp. Jenny helped him write a supplemental brief to accompany it. They began drafting a motion to dismiss. We have to be careful, Jenny said. They're not going to like being shown up by a teenager. Isaiah shrugged. They already don't. I'm not here to make them comfortable. The more they worked, the more the case turned. The prosecutor became less confident, more hesitant. She stopped referring to Isaiah as the suspect and began using his name. The judge stopped interrupting him. People noticed. Reporters didn't show up, yet, but one court clerk whispered to Jenny, "That kid's gonna make some noise one day." Jenny smiled. He already was. Isaiah never lost focus. Even when it got tiring, even when he wanted to quit. When his mom finally learned what had happened, he'd kept it from her at first, she sat down, pulled him close, and said, "You fight smart, baby. But don't forget to rest too." Layla drew him a cartoon of him in a cape holding a giant gavel. "Super lawyer Isaiah," she wrote in bright letters. He kept it in his folder. Jenny started skipping other court observations just to keep helping. She wasn't just tutoring anymore. She was learning from him. Watching him move through a space not meant for him, not built for him, and yet still find a way to win inside it. They weren't just preparing a defense. They were writing a new story. And every page they turned, every statute they cited, every motion they filed, brought them closer to a moment that would change everything. Because Isaiah Thompson wasn't just proving his innocence. He was proving that brilliance could rise from anywhere. Even from a cracked sidewalk on the south side. Even from a courtroom where judges laughed instead of listened. The moment the prosecution received the video footage and confirmed what Isaiah had been claiming all along, the tone of the courtroom began to shift. Not with apology, not with acknowledgement, but with something more subtle, hesitation. It wasn't in the words the ADA used but in how she used them, no longer speaking with that bored confidence of someone expecting a guilty plea, but instead pausing before each sentence like she was trying not to lose control of a narrative she thought she had locked down weeks ago. Isaiah noticed it. So did Jenny. They sat side by side in the library that afternoon, rewatching the footage for the third time, pausing on the same frame again and again, the tall figure dashing away in white high tops, the timestamp showing 8:29 p.m., the window already shattered. Isaiah had been inside the library, 30 blocks away, at 8:29 p.m. That meant something. Jenny said, "We need to push the timeline harder. Get the library records certified. We'll submit them with an affidavit." Isaiah nodded. "And the camera angle, see how the suspect limps on the left leg? I don't have that limp. We can call that out as inconsistent physical description." Jenny smiled, not with amusement but respect. "You're building this like a lawyer, not a defendant." "Because I'm tired of playing their role," Isaiah replied. "I don't want to be the defendant anymore. I want to take back the mic." Jenny tapped on her keyboard. "Then let's prep the motion to dismiss. If we can show there's no probable cause left, no solid link to you, the charges should be thrown out." "But will they?" Isaiah asked. "Even if we show everything?" She looked up. "They should. But you and I both know should doesn't always mean will." They stayed late that night, writing until the library lights dimmed and the custodian cleared his throat near the door. Outside, Atlanta felt humid and restless, but Isaiah's focus cut through the heat like a blade. He wasn't hoping anymore. He was calculating. Every word he wrote was aimed at a system that had tried to reduce him to a name on a docket. Jenny brought him case law on mistaken identity. Isaiah found rulings from Georgia courts that leaned toward suppression when timelines couldn't be verified. They stitched it all together, footnotes, citations, arguments. The brief read like it had come from a seasoned law office. The clerk who received it blinked twice at Isaiah's name, then looked up at him. "Who wrote this?" "I did," Isaiah said. The clerk shook her head like she wasn't sure what to believe, then stamped it and filed it without another word. The next hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Jenny wore her only blazer. Isaiah wore the same borrowed jacket, his mother having carefully pressed it that morning with an iron that barely steamed anymore. He had told her everything now, the arrest, the nights in the library, the motions, the video. She had sat in silence for a long moment after he finished, then leaned over, took his hand, and said, "You keep going. Don't let anyone stop your voice. You were meant for more than this mess." Layla slipped a little index card in his pocket as he left that morning. It read, "You already won. They just don't know it yet." The courtroom was quieter this time. Fewer people. No smirks. Even the judge seemed more alert. He addressed Isaiah with less sarcasm and more scrutiny, as if trying to place him in a new category now. Still a kid, yes, but maybe one who shouldn't be underestimated. The prosecutor stood, asked for a continuance. The state needs additional time to review the recently submitted materials and reassess its position. "Your Honor," Isaiah said, stepping forward without pause, "we oppose further delay. The evidence is clear. The suspect seen fleeing the scene does not match my description, the timestamp exonerates me, and there is no forensic link tying me to the location. We respectfully request a ruling on our motion to dismiss." Jenny, seated behind him, tried not to smile. The judge looked at the brief again. "Mr. Thompson, I have to say this is impressively written. However, we do need time to allow the prosecution to formally respond. You'll have your answer next week." Isaiah didn't flinch. "Understood, Your Honor." As they left, a young public defender stopped Isaiah in the hallway. "Hey, just wanted to say, I've seen seasoned attorneys freeze in there." "You didn't." Isaiah nodded, unsure how to respond to praise that felt like it came from a place of disbelief. Jenny said, "They're not used to seeing someone like you do this." "You mean someone my age," he said. "I mean someone your age and your skin." Jenny didn't say it to flatter him. She said it because it was true. They walked to the bus stop in silence. When the decision came the following week, it arrived in a slim envelope Isaiah found wedged between a school newsletter and an overdue water bill. He tore it open on the front steps. Jenny had texted him earlier, asking if he wanted to wait and open it together. But he couldn't. He had to know. The judge's ruling was clear. Upon review of the submitted evidence, including timestamp surveillance footage, certified library records, and the lack of direct witness identification, the court finds insufficient basis for continued prosecution. The case is dismissed. Isaiah sat down on the step and exhaled, paper trembling in his hand. It wasn't joy. It wasn't victory. It was something heavier. Validation. The burden lifting not all at once but piece by piece. He texted Jenny, "Dismissed. It's over." She called instantly. "Isaiah. You did it." "No. We did." He told his mother next, who covered her mouth and whispered, "Thank God," again and again like a mantra. Layla hugged him so tightly he couldn't breathe. But deep inside, Isaiah didn't feel finished. He didn't feel like a chapter had ended. He felt like one had just opened. Because if this could happen to him, with no evidence, no arrest warrant, no trial, just assumption, then how many other kids were still sitting in cells without a Jenny to help them, without a judge who took a second look? How many stories had been shut down before they ever started? Jenny met him the next day at the library. She brought a cake that read, "Case closed," and Isaiah actually laughed. It was the first time in weeks that his laughter didn't sound like armor. "You know you could actually do this, right?" she said. "Like, for real. Law school. Bar exam. The whole thing." "Yeah," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Even from South Atlanta?" "Especially from South Atlanta," she replied. They spent the afternoon drafting a new idea, not a motion, not a brief, but a plan. A scholarship application. A letter to a local civil rights legal nonprofit. A proposal to start a youth legal literacy program at his school. Isaiah wasn't just hungry for justice anymore. He was ready to serve it. Not later. Now. His case was over. His record wiped. His name cleared. But Isaiah Thompson had only just begun to speak. By the time the local news caught wind of what had happened in courtroom C-207, Isaiah had already moved on in his mind. The case was over. He wasn't thinking about headlines or interviews or being some kind of symbol. He was thinking about how to take what he'd learned and give it to someone else. But word had spread. A clerk had mentioned it to a friend, who knew a reporter who covered human interest stories, and within days, Isaiah's inbox was full of requests. Local teen defends himself in court, and wins, read the subject line of one message. Student legal prodigy, read another. He ignored the first few. But Jenny was the one who finally convinced him. Look, she said, setting her phone down at the library table where they always met, I know you don't want attention, but this isn't about ego. This is about visibility. What happened to you happens all the time. People need to see it. They need to see someone fight back and win. Isaiah stared at his notebook for a long moment before finally asking, what if I say something wrong? What if I don't explain it the right way? Jenny gave him a firm look. Isaiah. You explained Brady versus Maryland to a sitting judge. I think you can handle a 10-minute interview. He exhaled slowly, then nodded. The reporter met them outside the library that Thursday afternoon, camera in tow, microphone clipped, notebook ready. Her name was Maya Hunt, and she was different than Isaiah expected, no fake smiles, no overenthusiastic energy. Just focused. I'm not here to make you look like a miracle, she said as they sat down. I'm here to make people understand what happened and why it matters. You good with that? Isaiah nodded. Good. The interview started simple. Name. Age. School. Favorite subject. But it quickly turned deeper. What was it like to be arrested without evidence? What was it like standing in front of a judge who didn't believe you? What made you choose to represent yourself? How did you learn legal argumentation? Isaiah answered each question carefully, not rehearsed, but exact. I didn't do it because I thought I was special. I did it because I had no other choice. I knew if I waited for someone else to care, it would be too late. So I decided to learn how to fight with the only thing the system listens to, its own rules. Maya raised an eyebrow. That's a powerful statement. It's not just a statement, Isaiah said. It's survival. The next day, the piece aired on the local evening news. The headline, Teen Wrongly Accused Represents Himself, Exposes Broken System. The video showed clips of Isaiah speaking with calm confidence, pieces of the surveillance footage, shots of the library, a brief word from Jenny. By morning, Isaiah's story was everywhere. Shared on Facebook. Tweeted by educators. Posted on Instagram with captions like, Future Supreme Court Justice. He opened his phone and felt overwhelmed by the flood of attention. Messages from strangers. Requests for advice. Notes from parents saying their kids had been through something similar. A message from a retired lawyer in Baltimore offering to mentor him. A DM from a civil rights foundation asking if he wanted to speak at a youth justice summit. Jenny texted him just 3 words, told you so. But fame, even the small kind, isn't always easy to hold. At school, some teachers treated him like a celebrity, asking him to talk to their classes. Others gave him side eyes, maybe suspicious of all the noise. A few kids were jealous. One said, so what, you think you're famous now because you didn't go to jail? Isaiah didn't argue. He didn't explain. He just kept walking. Because he wasn't doing this for applause. He was doing it because the system that almost ruined his life still stood, and there were thousands of other kids just like him who didn't have a camera or a Jenny or a library card. That Saturday, he stood in front of his school's auditorium, invited by the principal to speak at a community event. He wore a clean shirt and his borrowed jacket. Jenny stood in the back, arms folded. His mom sat in the second row, Layla swinging her legs beside her. Isaiah stepped up to the mic, looked out at the crowd, students, parents, teachers, reporters, and took a breath. "My name is Isaiah Thompson," he began. "I'm 16 years old. And 2 months ago, I was arrested for a crime I didn't commit." The room went quiet. Even the air seemed to hold still. "I want to tell you what happens when you're arrested, not because you did something wrong, but because you fit a description. I want to tell you what happens when you're in a courtroom and the person in the robe laughs at you for trying to defend yourself. I want to tell you what it's like to stand alone and still stand up." He told his story, not just the events, but the fear, the pressure, the silence he had to break. And he told them how he broke it. "I didn't win because I had the best resources. I didn't win because I had money or power. I won because I had access to knowledge. And I used it." The audience erupted in applause when he finished, but Isaiah didn't smile until he saw his mom standing and clapping with tears in her eyes. After the event, people lined up to shake his hand. One teacher gave him a pocket constitution. A father hugged him. Jenny stood off to the side, watching the impact of a story that had almost never been told. "You still think you're just some kid from the South Side?" she asked when he finally got to her. Isaiah looked around, then back at her. "I think I'm just getting started." That night, they sat on the library steps long after closing, the buzz of the event still ringing in their ears. "I want to build something," Isaiah said. "Something for kids who don't know they can fight back." Jenny nodded. "A program?" "Yeah. Workshops. Teach kids how the system works before it tries to eat them alive. Teach them how to speak legal language. Show them what I didn't know until it almost ended me." Jenny pulled out her notebook. "Let's sketch it out. A curriculum. A name. A goal." They worked until midnight. By the time they finished, the first draft of the Know Your Power initiative was born. It would be a non-profit someday. For now, it was a dream. But it was real. The media would move on. The public would forget. The judge who laughed would never apologize. But Isaiah Thompson had already planted something deeper. A movement that didn't depend on cameras or courtrooms. A movement that started in a broken system and turned into a blueprint for changing it. And as the lights dimmed around the city, and the library steps grew cool beneath them, Isaiah looked up at the sky and whispered, "This isn't where I stop. This is where I rise." The first time someone came to Isaiah for legal help, it wasn't in a courtroom or on the street but in the corner of the school cafeteria, where the air smelled like sweat and reheated spaghetti, and the noise of slamming trays and half-shouted conversations bounced off the stained tile ceiling. It was Jermaine, a junior who mostly kept to himself, known for hoodies, headphones, and skate shoes with worn soles. He walked up slow, like he wasn't sure if he'd get ignored or laughed at. Isaiah had just sat down with his lunch, chicken nuggets and apple slices, and was halfway through a page of criminal statute notes he was annotating for the Know Your Power workshop when Jermaine stood across from him and said, "Yo. Can I talk to you about something legal?" Isaiah blinked, put his pencil down. "Yeah. What's up?" Jermaine glanced around, lowered his voice. "It's about my cousin. They trying to pin a breaking and entering on him, said he was at the house when it got robbed, but he wasn't even in the state. He was visiting his grandma in Tennessee. They arrested him 2 nights ago. Said they had an eyewitness but won't say who. His public defender don't even talk to him, man." Isaiah felt a familiar pressure in his chest, not fear, not anger, but urgency, the same pulse he'd felt when he read his own charge sheet for the first time. "What's your cousin's name?" "Khalil Benton. He's 17. They holding him at the youth facility off Fulton Industrial." Isaiah nodded slowly. "You got any paperwork?" Case number? Anything like that? Jermaine pulled a crumpled envelope from his pocket and slid it across the table. Inside was the charging document, offense code, date, alleged location, and an arrest report with nothing but generic language about probable cause developed through witness identification. Isaiah scanned it fast. The arrest had happened only 2 days ago. He looked up. You said he was out of state. Yeah. He posted pictures on Instagram at his grandma's. Time-stamped, tagged, the whole thing. That could be alibi evidence. You got the screenshots. Jermaine pulled his phone out, thumbed through his camera roll, and showed Isaiah 4 pictures of Khalil at a small house, dated and time-stamped the same evening the alleged break-in occurred. You mind emailing me these? I'll show you how to write up a request for discovery so his public defender has to push for it. Jermaine stared at him. You serious? Dead serious, Isaiah said. And I'll help draft an affidavit his grandma can sign to support the alibi. That night, Isaiah stayed up late. Not on TikTok, not watching game highlights, but writing a sample motion using Khalil's information. He referenced Georgia Rule 16, explained the legal standard for disclosure, and footnoted a Supreme Court ruling that confirmed a defendant's right to access exculpatory digital media. He emailed it to Jermaine with instructions and a message: this is just the start. Don't give up. Word spread fast after that. By the end of the week, 3 more students had come to Isaiah quietly, one asking about their older brother's pending marijuana charge, another needing help understanding a suspension that came with a referral to juvenile court, and a third whose mom had been fined over $1,000 for a missed court appearance on a traffic violation that wasn't even her fault. Isaiah never claimed to be a lawyer. He always said, I'm not licensed. I can't give you legal advice. But I can help you understand what's happening and what to ask. That distinction mattered. He knew the line. But more than that, he knew the fear. The way the system didn't just trap people, it confused them, overwhelmed them, made them feel stupid for not understanding rules that were written to keep them in the dark. Jenny was stunned when he told her how many students were coming to him. You're becoming a legal first responder, she said. What you're doing, it's revolutionary. Isaiah shrugged. It's necessary. That weekend, they held their first Know Your Power session in the back of a local rec center. Only 6 kids showed up. Isaiah stood at the front with a whiteboard he'd borrowed from a science teacher, wearing a simple gray hoodie and jeans. No pretense. No ego. Just truth. He started with a question. Who here knows what Miranda rights actually mean? A few hands. Hesitant answers. You have the right to remain silent, that's the part everybody knows, Isaiah said. But the part they forget to teach you is that anything you say can and will be used against you. That means you don't just have the right to stay quiet, you have the right to protect yourself from being twisted into a confession. He explained what probable cause meant. What it didn't mean. How to ask for a lawyer. How to document interactions with law enforcement. How to stay safe without staying silent. The kids leaned in. Asked questions. Took notes. Some looked angry, others confused, some scared. But they listened. By the end of the 2-hour session, 2 kids stayed behind to ask if they could volunteer to help teach others. Isaiah smiled. That's the goal, he said. This isn't about me. It's about all of us. Jenny watched from the side, heart swelling. He wasn't just a prodigy anymore. He was becoming a leader. A builder. Someone who didn't just survive injustice but used it as fuel to create something better. But with attention came friction. A week later, Isaiah was called to the assistant principal's office. He walked in expecting a scheduling issue. What he got instead was a lecture. We've heard from a few parents that you've been offering legal guidance to students. Now, I know you're trying to help, Isaiah, but we need to be careful. You're not a licensed attorney. Isaiah sat up straighter. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm showing kids how to read their own documents, how to ask questions, how to know their rights. That's education. The assistant principal frowned. Even so, we have to avoid liability. Maybe it's best if you stop. Isaiah's jaw tightened. So you're telling me it's okay for kids to get arrested without knowing anything, but not okay for me to teach them what a warrant is? The man's face twitched. That's not what I said. That's what it sounds like. The meeting ended without a clear decision. But Isaiah knew one thing: he wasn't stopping. If they pushed back harder, he'd just take the program off campus entirely. Move it to community centers, churches, libraries. Whatever it took. The system had tried to silence him once, and he'd won. He wouldn't forget that. Not ever. Later that day, Jenny found him on the bleachers behind the gym. Heard they pulled you in. Told me to stop. Jenny rolled her eyes. Of course they did. But I won't, Isaiah said. We didn't build this just to quit the second it made people uncomfortable. She grinned. Good. Because I already booked the rec center for next Saturday. And I got 2 law students to come help answer questions. Isaiah blinked, then laughed. A real one. You're sneaky. I'm strategic, Jenny replied. That night, Isaiah lay in bed staring at the ceiling. His legal folder sat on the floor beside him, stuffed with case notes, handwritten outlines, printed laws, and drawings from Layla. He wasn't trying to be famous. He wasn't trying to be some teenage genius. He was just trying to fix what almost broke him. And now he was fixing it for others, too. With every student who came to him for help, with every workshop, every explanation, every copy of the Constitution he handed out, Isaiah Thompson was turning his story into a shield. Not just for himself. But for everyone who'd been told their voice didn't matter. The email came on a rainy Thursday evening, just as Isaiah was wrapping up a Know Your Power session at the downtown library. His phone buzzed in his pocket while he was answering a 6th grader's question about school resource officers and whether they could search your backpack without permission. Isaiah paused, answered clearly, then reached for his phone while Jenny handed out printed rights cards to the group. The screen showed a single line, subject, from Judge Whitmore. He froze. His heart thudded once, hard, then again, slower this time but heavier. He hadn't heard that name since the day his case was dismissed, the day he stood in that courtroom and watched the judge flip through his motion like it was a puzzle he hadn't expected a teenager to solve. That judge had laughed at him once, mocked him, minimized him, written him off because of his hoodie, his tone, his age, and most of all, his skin. Isaiah had tried not to think about it since. He'd moved on, or at least that's what he told himself. But the name in his inbox cracked open a space inside him he hadn't touched in weeks. He waited until he got home to open the message. It was short. 3 sentences. Isaiah, I recently saw the news segment about your story. I want to say I underestimated you, and I apologize for how I handled your case in the early stages. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet and hear more about your work with Know Your Power. No signature beyond Judge Whitmore. No formal tone. Just plain words that felt heavier than any ruling Isaiah had read in the Georgia case archive. He stared at the screen for a long time, thinking about how quickly people wanted to make things right once the cameras showed up. Part of him wanted to ignore it. To delete it and move on. He didn't need closure from a man who'd only respected him after he proved himself. But another part of him. The part that spent every day now trying to bridge the gap between systems and students, said maybe this was bigger than personal. Maybe this was about power. Not ego. Not revenge. But power through truth. He replied the next morning. I'm available after school Friday. Meet me at the Auburn Avenue Library. Bring an open mind. Jenny nearly dropped her coffee when he told her. He reached out. The judge? That judge? Isaiah nodded. Said he wants to meet. She narrowed her eyes. You sure you want to give him the time? No, Isaiah admitted. But I'm going to anyway. Why? Because I want to look him in the face and show him who I really am. Not as a defendant. As a voice. Friday came with cold wind and gray skies, and Isaiah arrived at the library early, setting up a table with Know Your Power pamphlets and handouts from their latest workshop series. He didn't want this to feel like a student-teacher meeting. He wanted it to feel like a presentation. A briefing. A statement. At 4:03 p.m., Judge Whitmore walked through the doors wearing a dark coat, his posture stiff, his expression unreadable. He looked smaller than Isaiah remembered. Less looming. More human. Isaiah, he said simply, stopping by the table. Judge, Isaiah replied. A beat of silence passed before Whitmore spoke again. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. Isaiah nodded once, then gestured to the chair across from him. You said you wanted to hear about my work. This is it. For the next 15 minutes, Isaiah laid it out, not just what Know Your Power was, but why it existed, how it grew, who it helped, the laws they taught, the rights they protected, the questions they encouraged students to ask. He explained the need, the urgency, the vacuum of trust between youth and the legal system. He didn't spare the truth. He didn't sugarcoat what it felt like to be on the other side of a bench where a man laughed at him without even hearing him out. Whitmore listened. Quietly. His hands folded. His mouth tight. When Isaiah finished, there was another pause. Then the judge spoke. I've sat on that bench for 12 years. I've seen thousands of cases. And I'm ashamed to say I've probably missed more than I realized. But what you did, it exposed something I didn't want to admit about myself. Isaiah didn't blink. Which is? That I judged you the second I saw you. Before you said a word. I saw a black teenager with a hoodie and a charge sheet, and I let every tired assumption I've ever absorbed dictate my tone. And when you spoke legal language, when you challenged the process, I felt threatened instead of impressed. That was my failure. Isaiah took a slow breath. And now that I've proved myself, you want to apologize? Yes, the judge said, his voice low. But more than that, I want to learn. From you. That surprised Isaiah. For a long second, he didn't respond. Then finally, he asked, what do you want to do with what you learn? The judge leaned forward. Use it to train other judges. Start conversations in chambers. Challenge the culture that shaped my first reaction to you. Isaiah stared at him. You really think they'll listen to you talk about listening to a 16-year-old? They might, Whitmore said. Because they still see me as one of them. But I'll make sure they hear your name while I do it. Isaiah nodded slowly. Then maybe we have a start. Whitmore stood, extended a hand. Isaiah shook it without flinching. Not because he needed the handshake. But because he wanted the man to feel the strength in his grip. They exchanged contact info, and the judge left quietly. Isaiah watched him go, feeling something complicated unfurl in his chest, satisfaction, maybe, but also a kind of sadness. It shouldn't take public attention for people to change. It shouldn't take being challenged by a teenager to reevaluate your power. But if that's what it took, then so be it. Later that night, Isaiah told his mom. She listened carefully, then said, sometimes the people with the most power are the ones who've never had to question how they use it. You made him question it. That's bigger than any courtroom win. Layla chimed in from the couch. You should make him come to your next workshop. And make him sit in the back like a student. Isaiah laughed. Maybe I will. Jenny was equally stunned. You shook his hand. I did. How'd it feel? Like I took something back that he never knew he took from me. The next Know Your Power session doubled in size. Word was spreading. And now, thanks to Jenny's push, a local nonprofit had agreed to sponsor them, providing printed materials, snacks for kids, even a tiny budget for transportation stipends. Isaiah stood in front of the group that Saturday, his voice steady, his eyes clear. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand your rights. You don't have to be an adult to ask the right questions. You just have to believe your voice matters. Because if you don't, someone else will try to tell your story for you. A hand went up in the back. A 7th grader in a red hoodie. What if the judge doesn't believe us? Isaiah didn't hesitate. Then make them believe the law. And if that doesn't work, keep fighting until someone listens. Because someone will. And if they don't, we will. In that moment, Isaiah wasn't just a kid who beat the system. He was a builder of something new, something durable. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The invitation arrived in a thick white envelope with a gold seal and no return address, slipped into Isaiah's locker sometime between third period and lunch, and it felt more like a prank than a serious request until he opened it and read the letter inside. Dear Mr. Isaiah Thompson, you are formally invited to participate in this year's Southeastern Youth Legal Symposium as a guest panelist. Your recent work through Know Your Power has inspired legal educators, youth advocates, and community leaders throughout the region. We believe your insight as both a system-impacted youth and a self-taught legal educator is invaluable to the conversation we are building. The symposium will be held in Atlanta on Saturday, March 15th, with panelists from across the country. We hope you will accept. He read it twice. Then a third time. Then he just stared at it, stunned. This wasn't some classroom event or a school assembly. This was real. Professional. Adults in suits and law degrees, and now they wanted him, the same kid who'd been mocked in court for daring to speak legal language, to sit beside them and talk policy, education, justice. He brought it to Jenny the second he saw her. She read the letter with wide eyes, then looked up with a half-smile that held equal parts awe and warning. Okay, this is big. Like, real big. Are you ready for that kind of spotlight? Isaiah nodded, but his voice was quieter when he answered. I think so. She tapped the paper. Good. Because they weren't ready for you the first time. And I don't think they're ready for you now either. Isaiah spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Not memorizing lines, not writing some dramatic speech. He went over real stories, students who'd come to him for help, laws that didn't protect them, questions they were too afraid to ask. He built a case, not just for Know Your Power, but for an entire shift in how the legal system talked to young people. When March 15th arrived, Isaiah stepped into the downtown convention center wearing a clean button-down shirt, slacks, and the same gray jacket he wore the day he argued his own case. He didn't want to look like a lawyer. He wanted to look like himself. Because that was the point. The ballroom was massive. Lights, microphones, tables with nameplates and tiny water bottles. Rows of professionals filled the seats, public defenders, youth advocates, professors from big-name universities. He spotted one man from a news interview he'd seen online and a woman he recognized from a podcast about juvenile sentencing reform. Jenny sat in the front row, her phone ready. Isaiah found his name on the panel table, Isaiah Thompson, youth advocate, and sat between a professor from Emory Law and a nonprofit director from Charlotte. The moderator, a tall woman with kind eyes and a clear voice, welcomed everyone and began with introductions. When it was Isaiah's turn, she gestured toward him with a nod. Isaiah Thompson, founder of Know Your Power, a peer-led legal education initiative that began in response to his own experience with the juvenile justice system. He leaned forward, hands folded, and spoke into the mic. Thank you. I'm not here because I wanted to be a part of the system. I'm here because I was forced into it, and once I was inside, I realized how many kids like me never make it out. Know Your Power exists to change that. The room was quiet. Listening. Then came the questions. What inspired your approach? How do you structure your sessions? What resistance have you faced from schools or legal authorities? Isaiah answered them all with clarity, drawing from real examples: Khalil's case, the assistant principal's warning, the kids who said they felt smart for the first time after learning their rights. Then the moderator asked something that made the air shift. What would you say to a judge who dismissed you because of how you looked or spoke? Isaiah didn't flinch. I'd say this: you don't have to believe in someone to treat them with respect. And if you can't do that, you shouldn't be making decisions about their life. A murmur moved through the crowd. Isaiah let it settle. Then added, justice doesn't begin in a courtroom. It begins in how we listen. After the panel, a line formed. Adults. Youth. Reporters. Everyone wanted a word with him. One professor said, "You changed how I think about student advocacy." A public defender gave him her card and said, "You're doing what half our bar should be." A teenage girl from Birmingham pulled him aside and whispered, "They kicked me out of school for defending myself. Can you help me understand what to do next?" He gave her one of the Know Your Power resource sheets and said, "You don't have to fight alone." Jenny beamed from the side. "You crushed it," she whispered when they finally got a moment alone. "You didn't just hold your own. You took over." Isaiah smiled, but there was something heavier in his eyes. "Now that they're listening, I need to make sure they keep hearing us. This can't just be a feel-good moment." Jenny nodded. "Then we turn it into a movement." That night, Isaiah was invited to a private dinner hosted by one of the symposium sponsors, a well-known civil rights law firm. The room was filled with conversation about systemic change, policy drafts, new bills. A partner from the firm pulled him aside after the main course. "Isaiah, you ever thought about law school?" He laughed lightly. "I'm 16. The partner grinned. "Doesn't matter. We're watching. And when the time comes, you'll have support." Isaiah thanked him, but something inside twisted, not from doubt, but from determination. Because while everyone else was finally seeing potential in him, he was still seeing the kids who didn't have that luxury. Kids who'd been expelled, arrested, ignored, misjudged. He was grateful, but he couldn't forget. 2 days later, back in school, nothing felt glamorous. The hallways were noisy, the teachers tired, the work constant. But Isaiah went to his locker, pulled out a stack of rights cards, and started handing them out again. Jermaine caught up with him near the cafeteria. "Yo, that thing you sent my cousin's lawyer? It worked. They dropped the charges. Said the alibi lined up too tight. They let him go yesterday." Isaiah exhaled and nodded. "That's how it should have been from the start." Jermaine grinned. "You like our own secret lawyer?" "Not a lawyer," Isaiah said. "Just someone who pays attention." That afternoon, the assistant principal stopped him in the hallway. "Heard you were on the symposium panel," he said. "Good job. That's a big deal." Isaiah nodded. "Thank you." The man hesitated. "Keep doing what you're doing. Just be careful." Isaiah looked him in the eye. "With respect, sir, being careful almost got me locked up. I'd rather be honest." The man didn't respond. Just gave a slow nod and walked away. Jenny met Isaiah outside after school, holding 2 iced teas. "So, what's next?" He looked out over the street, the cars, the noise, the endless rhythm of a city that kept moving whether you were ready or not. "Next is scaling this. More sessions. More trainers. I want to start a podcast. Something youth can listen to in their own voice, not some adult trying to translate their pain into policy." Jenny nodded. "And after that?" Isaiah smiled. "After that? We build something they can't ignore." The wind picked up, scattering loose paper on the sidewalk. Isaiah bent down, grabbed a flyer for a youth basketball league, and looked at it thoughtfully. "You know what's wild?" he said. All these programs for sports, art, STEM, but nothing teaching kids what to do when they're put in a system that treats them like suspects first. Jenny raised an eyebrow. So you want to be in every rec center now? No, Isaiah said. I want Know Your Power to be a requirement, not an option. I want it in school curriculums. I want it before the courtroom. I want it to make the courtroom the last resort, not the first stop. And in that moment, the city around him blurred into quiet as the sound of his own ambition rang louder. He wasn't just a prodigy. He was a movement. And they still weren't ready for what he was about to become. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The success of the symposium and the growing attention around Know Your Power was a double-edged sword. Isaiah felt it immediately, a tension in the air that wasn't there before. The more his voice grew, the more resistance came from places he hadn't expected: school administrators, local law enforcement, even some community leaders who feared the change he represented. The Monday after the symposium, Isaiah walked into school with a new kind of weight. It wasn't the usual homework or tests, but a sense that eyes were watching him more closely, waiting for him to slip up. As he passed the main office, the assistant principal called him over. Isaiah, we need to talk, he said in a low voice. Isaiah nodded, following him into a small, windowless room. There have been some complaints, the man began, avoiding eye contact. About your workshops. Some parents think you're encouraging kids to challenge authority too much. Isaiah blinked. Challenging authority is the point. If people aren't held accountable, nothing changes. The assistant principal sighed. I understand that. But there's pressure from the district to keep things calm. They don't want more disruptions. Isaiah felt the old frustration rise, but he held it back. So, what are you saying? We're going to have to put a pause on your sessions for now. At least until we can review the content. Isaiah stared at him, disbelieving. You want to silence a program that teaches kids their rights? I'm just the messenger, the man said, voice tight. Please think about your options. Isaiah left the office with his fists clenched. He texted Jenny immediately. She replied almost instantly, we knew this was coming. What do you want to do? The next day, Isaiah and Jenny met at their usual spot in the library, surrounded by stacks of legal books and Know Your Power materials. We can't stop now, Isaiah said firmly. If anything, this shows how necessary it is. Jenny nodded. Then we go public. Get the community behind us. Isaiah hesitated. He knew that meant exposing himself to more scrutiny, but deep down, he knew the truth was stronger than fear. Together, they crafted a plan, a community meeting to explain the purpose of Know Your Power, invite parents, students, teachers, and local leaders to hear directly from the youth. Flyers went up around the neighborhood, social media posts were shared, and calls were made to local activists. On the night of the meeting, the room was packed. Some faces were familiar. Parents who had sent their kids to Isaiah's sessions, teachers curious about the program, even a few skeptical school officials. Isaiah stood at the front, heart pounding but steady. Thank you all for coming, he began. Know Your Power isn't about rebellion. It's about respect. Respect for yourself, your community, and yes, the law. But respect also means knowing when the system fails you, and having the tools to speak up. A mother raised her hand. I'm worried it teaches my son to argue with police. That's dangerous. Isaiah nodded. I understand that fear. But it's about safety. Knowing your rights can keep you safe. It's not about disrespect, it's about survival. Another parent spoke, my daughter came home talking about Know Your Power. She's more confident now. Isn't that what we want? The room buzzed with conversation, some supportive, some tense. When the school principal stood to speak, Isaiah held his breath. The principal surprised everyone. "We want our students to be empowered and safe. We're committed to working with Know Your Power to find a way forward." The crowd murmured approval. Isaiah exhaled. But the next morning, the school sent an official letter to parents saying the sessions were postponed pending review. The fight was far from over. Around the city, rumors spread, some fueled by fear, others by misunderstanding. Isaiah's social media blew up with messages, some supportive, others threatening. The legal prodigy who'd once been laughed at was now a target. Yet amidst the chaos, something else happened. An anonymous donor contacted Jenny, offering funding to keep Know Your Power alive outside of the school system. They found a small community center willing to host weekend sessions. Isaiah and Jenny shifted gears. The work moved out of school and into the streets, the libraries, the churches. Word spread even faster. More youth came, eager to learn, eager to speak. Isaiah saw firsthand the power of knowledge, kids who once felt invisible now standing tall, holding conversations about justice, fairness, and their future. But with every step forward, the system pushed back harder. One evening, as Isaiah was leaving a session, a police officer stopped him. "We've had complaints about your gatherings," the officer said, tone stern. "You're stirring trouble." Isaiah kept calm. "We're educating. We want fewer kids caught up in the system, not more." The officer's eyes narrowed. "Be careful, kid." Isaiah watched him walk away, the words echoing. Careful. That word haunted him. But it wasn't fear that fueled Isaiah now. It was fire. A fire born of every injustice, every sneer, every dismissal he'd endured. The system wasn't ready for him. It wasn't ready for the truth he brought. And it would take everything they had to try to silence him. But Isaiah knew this wasn't just his fight anymore. It was theirs. The youth who came with questions, with hope, with courage. The community that refused to let them be erased. The movement they were building, one session, one story, one truth at a time. And deep inside, Isaiah believed that no matter how hard the system pushed back, it couldn't stop what was already in motion. Because knowledge was power. And power belonged to the people. The challenges Isaiah faced only sharpened his focus, but it became clear he couldn't do this alone. The system was too vast, the resistance too entrenched. What he needed were allies, people who understood the fight from different angles and could help amplify his voice. It started unexpectedly with Mrs. Parker, his English teacher, who approached him after class one day. "Isaiah, I've been following what you're doing," she said quietly. "If you want, I can help you prepare some of your speeches or write op-eds to get your message out there." Isaiah blinked, surprised by the offer but grateful. Mrs. Parker wasn't just a teacher, she was someone who saw the student beneath the labels. Soon, other teachers expressed support in hushed conversations. Even Mr. Reynolds, the strictest math teacher, stopped him in the hallway. "Keep going, kid. What you're doing matters." These small gestures gave Isaiah strength, but he knew he needed bigger support. The anonymous donor Jenny mentioned had a name, Marcus Lee, a civil rights attorney who had made waves defending youth in juvenile court. Marcus invited Isaiah to meet at a local cafe filled with the scent of coffee and books. "You're doing what many lawyers don't even try," Marcus said, sliding a folder across the table filled with case files and legal memos. "I want to help you navigate this system, not just fight it." Their partnership grew quickly. Marcus connected Isaiah with a network of lawyers, activists, and educators who saw Know Your Power as a game-changer. One of them, Elena Morales, a community organizer, offered to help expand workshops into neighboring towns. "You're lighting a fire," she said. "We just need to make sure it spreads." Meanwhile, Isaiah kept running weekend sessions at the community center, now filled with more kids than ever before. The space buzzed with energy, questions, debates, stories. One young girl named Mia shared how she'd been unfairly suspended for speaking out against a teacher's unfair treatment of students. Isaiah helped her draft a letter appealing the suspension, explaining her rights and why her voice mattered. When the school reluctantly reinstated Mia, the news rippled through the group. These victories fueled hope. But the opposition didn't waver. At one workshop, a man claiming to be a school board member showed up, warning the kids to stay away from Isaiah's radical ideas. The room held its breath. Isaiah calmly asked, "What's so radical about knowing your rights?" The man left, muttering, but the moment only strengthened the group's resolve. Jenny captured everything on video, creating short clips to share on social media. The response was overwhelming, messages from youth across the state, teachers asking how to start similar programs, even some parents who admitted they'd been skeptical but were now proud. The same juvenile court where the judge had once laughed at him was now summoning him, not as a defendant, but as a witness in a new case involving a friend from the program. Isaiah knew this would test everything he'd worked for. The case was complicated. His friend Malik had been arrested during a protest against school policies that disproportionately punished students of color. The charges were serious: disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Isaiah had been working with Malik on understanding his rights and documenting his interactions with law enforcement. Now, the court wanted Isaiah to testify about what he knew. The day of the hearing arrived, and Isaiah walked into the courthouse with Jenny by his side, the weight of the moment pressing down. The courtroom was cold and intimidating, the walls echoing with whispered conversations and shuffling papers. The same judge, older but no kinder, sat behind the bench. His eyes flicked over Isaiah as if weighing whether this kid had earned the right to stand there. The prosecutor began questioning Isaiah, trying to undermine his credibility. "Isn't it true you've had trouble with the law before?" Isaiah met the judge's gaze and answered calmly, "I've made mistakes, but I've learned from them. That's why I teach others about their rights." The judge snorted quietly, but Isaiah pressed on. He described how Malik's actions were peaceful, how Malik had tried to comply, and how the arrest seemed excessive. He referenced laws and precedents he'd studied, speaking with the confidence of someone who knew the system inside and out. The defense attorney looked impressed, while the prosecutor grew visibly frustrated. When the judge questioned Isaiah directly, his tone edged with skepticism. "You claim to be a legal educator. What training do you have?" Isaiah smiled faintly. "I'm self-taught. I've spent years researching laws, attending seminars, and teaching peers about their rights. My experience has been in the real world, not just classrooms." The judge's eyes narrowed, but he allowed Isaiah to continue. Throughout the hearing, Isaiah's testimony was clear and persuasive. He cited statutes, explained the importance of youth knowing their rights, and highlighted the impact of unjust arrests on young lives. After hours of back and forth, the judge finally called a recess. Outside the courtroom, Jenny pulled Isaiah aside. "You held your ground. They didn't expect you to come prepared." Isaiah nodded, but inside, he felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. The fight was far from over. When the hearing resumed, Malik's lawyer presented evidence that cast doubt on the prosecution's case, bodycam footage showing Malik's compliance and witnesses supporting Isaiah's testimony. The courtroom atmosphere shifted. The judge, once dismissive, seemed more measured. When it came time to rule, he surprised everyone by reducing the charges to a minor infraction, acknowledging the value of Isaiah's testimony in clarifying the facts. It was a small victory, but a powerful one. Isaiah had stood up to the very system that had once tried to silence him and won a measure of respect. The news spread quickly. Local papers ran stories highlighting the role of youth advocacy in the case, and Isaiah's name became linked not just to Know Your Power but to real change in the courtroom. Yet Isaiah knew this was only the beginning. The system was slow to change, and for every small win, there were still countless young people facing injustice daily. But now, Isaiah had a new tool: credibility. The courtroom that once mocked him had become a platform to challenge injustice head-on. After the hearing, Marcus Lee approached him with a smile. "You just proved you belong in this world." Ever thought about law school again? Isaiah laughed. More than ever. Jenny clapped him on the back. We're just getting started. That night, Isaiah sat at his desk, drafting new lesson plans for Know Your Power and outlining ideas for a community legal newsletter. His phone buzzed with messages from kids asking for help, parents wanting resources, and activists seeking collaboration. The fight wasn't over, but Isaiah felt ready. He wasn't just the kid the judge laughed at anymore. He was the legal prodigy who had turned that laughter into fuel, and who was determined to change the system for everyone who followed. The courtroom victory thrust Isaiah further into the spotlight. Reporters who had once ignored his story now wanted to hear from the young man who had challenged a judge and helped reshape a legal narrative. It started with a local newspaper interview, then a radio segment, and before long, a regional TV station invited him for a live interview. Isaiah was cautious but understood the power of media. He prepared carefully, rehearsing how to explain Know Your Power without sounding like a lecture or a rallying cry. On camera, his calm confidence surprised even the producers. "What inspired you to start Know Your Power?" the reporter asked. Isaiah paused, then said, "I saw how the system treated people who looked like me, as if we didn't matter or didn't deserve fairness. I wanted to change that by giving youth the tools to know their rights and stand up for themselves." The interview went viral online. Social media exploded with support and debate. Some praised Isaiah as a hero, others dismissed him as a troublemaker. But Isaiah didn't flinch. He used every platform to keep the conversation going, answering questions, sharing stories, and encouraging youth to join the movement. The attention brought new opportunities. A local university offered Isaiah a scholarship to their pre-law program. Community organizations invited him to speak at events and workshops. Yet with visibility came scrutiny. Some critics accused him of being too radical, while others tried to twist his words. Isaiah learned quickly how to handle tough questions and hostile interviews without losing his message or composure. Behind the scenes, Jenny helped manage his growing online presence, carefully crafting posts that highlighted the movement's goals and successes. They also developed a digital newsletter that shared legal tips, news updates, and personal stories from youth involved in Know Your Power. The newsletter spread across the city and beyond, becoming a beacon for young activists and legal enthusiasts. Despite the busy schedule, Isaiah remained grounded. He made time for his family, who remained his biggest supporters. His mother often reminded him, "You're changing more than laws, you're changing hearts." One afternoon, Isaiah received a call from a national civil rights group asking if he would be interested in partnering on a youth leadership campaign. It was a huge step, something he had dreamed about but never expected so soon. After a long conversation with Jenny and Marcus, they agreed. This partnership would bring resources and a broader platform to their work, but it also meant navigating complex politics and alliances. Isaiah was ready. The next weeks were a whirlwind of planning, interviews, and new workshops. He met with other young leaders from around the country, sharing experiences and strategies. The community center became a hub for this growing network of youth advocates. At one event, Isaiah spoke alongside a well-known civil rights lawyer who praised his work as a model for how young people can shape the future of justice. The words meant everything. Yet Isaiah never lost sight of the day-to-day realities that fueled his mission, the kids who came to workshops scared, confused, or angry. He made sure each session ended with a moment of reflection and encouragement, reminding them that knowledge was their greatest weapon. Still, the judge who had laughed at him lingered in Isaiah's mind. He wondered if that man realized the impact of his dismissive laughter. One evening, after a TV appearance, Isaiah received an unexpected letter from the judge himself. The note was brief, acknowledging Isaiah's accomplishments and expressing a willingness to meet and discuss youth legal education. Isaiah wasn't sure how to feel. Was this a genuine olive branch or a political move? He shared the letter with Marcus and Jenny, who encouraged him to see it as an opportunity rather than a threat. After careful consideration, Isaiah agreed to meet the judge. The meeting was tense but civil. The judge admitted he had underestimated Isaiah but was curious about Know Your Power's potential. Isaiah spoke passionately about the need for understanding between generations and the importance of youth voices in the legal system. The conversation ended with a tentative agreement to explore ways to bring legal education into schools more effectively. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was progress. Isaiah left the courthouse feeling a mixture of hope and determination. The fight for justice was far from over, but the tides were shifting. With every step forward, Isaiah realized that his journey was bigger than himself. It was about opening doors for the generations to come. As he walked home that night, he thought about the young girl who had once sat quietly in a workshop, afraid to speak up, and the thousands now finding their voices. The media spotlight was bright and sometimes harsh, but it illuminated the path ahead, a path Isaiah was ready to walk, no matter what challenges awaited. Isaiah's meeting with the judge marked a new chapter in his journey, one filled with cautious optimism but also deeper challenges. The judge's unexpected openness gave Isaiah a glimpse of the possibility for change within the system, but Isaiah knew real progress required more than dialogue, it demanded action. Back at the community center, Isaiah focused on expanding Know Your Power beyond workshops and social media. He wanted to create a structured curriculum that schools could adopt, reaching more youth with lessons on legal rights, civic engagement, and advocacy skills. Partnering with Marcus, Jenny, and Elena Morales, Isaiah drafted the curriculum to be accessible, engaging, and practical. They included role-playing exercises, mock trials, and real-world scenarios to make learning interactive. To their surprise, a few local schools showed interest. Isaiah was invited to present the program at a district meeting, where skeptical administrators raised concerns about the content being too political or disruptive. Isaiah calmly explained that the goal was not to stir trouble but to empower students to understand their rights and responsibilities as citizens. His passion and professionalism won over some, but others remained hesitant. The resistance wasn't just from adults, some students also questioned whether engaging with the legal system would make any difference. To address this, Isaiah organized visits to courthouses, law firms, and community organizations, helping students see firsthand how the law impacted their lives and how they could influence it. One memorable trip took them to the state capitol, where they met legislators and observed a session. The experience sparked excitement and a sense of possibility among the students. Meanwhile, Isaiah's own education advanced as he enrolled in the university's pre-law program, balancing classes with his activism. He discovered new areas of law, constitutional, civil rights, juvenile justice, that deepened his understanding and fueled his resolve. Despite the academic pressure, Isaiah never lost sight of Know Your Power's mission. He often said, "This isn't just about me going to law school. It's about creating a pipeline so other kids can follow." The program's impact grew. Stories poured in from students who used their new knowledge to challenge unfair school policies, advocate for themselves during interactions with police, or even help family members navigate legal issues. These stories became the heart of Know Your Power, reminding Isaiah why the work mattered. Yet with growth came new obstacles. Some parents worried the program encouraged defiance rather than respect. School boards debated whether to fund it. The media spotlight brought both praise and criticism, with some accusing Isaiah of pushing a political agenda. Isaiah faced moments of doubt and exhaustion but found strength in the community he'd built, the teachers, parents, students, and advocates who believed in the cause. One afternoon, a breakthrough came when a respected state senator invited Isaiah to testify before a legislative committee considering a bill to fund youth legal education programs statewide. Isaiah prepared meticulously, knowing this was an opportunity to turn his vision into policy. Standing before the committee, he shared personal stories of injustice and empowerment, emphasizing the importance of equipping youth with knowledge and tools. His testimony was powerful and heartfelt, earning nods of approval and stirring emotions in the room. After weeks of lobbying and community support, the bill passed. Funding was secured to implement Know Your Power's curriculum in schools across the state, a monumental victory. Isaiah felt a surge of pride but also the weight of responsibility. The program's success meant more scrutiny and higher expectations. He worked tirelessly to ensure quality, training teachers and adapting materials. The transformation was visible. Schools that embraced the program saw students become more engaged and confident. Some even began holding youth councils to discuss school policies and community issues. Isaiah's vision was unfolding in real time. Through all this, Isaiah reflected on how far he'd come from the courtroom where the judge once laughed at him. The laughter, once a symbol of dismissal, had become a catalyst for change. He realized that breaking barriers wasn't just about confronting individuals but shifting mindsets and systems. Isaiah's journey was far from over, but each step forward was a testament to resilience and hope. As he stood before a new group of students, sharing his story and lessons learned, he saw the same fire in their eyes that had once driven him. The cycle of empowerment was alive and growing, proving that even the most unlikely beginnings could lead to powerful change. Just as Isaiah's work with Know Your Power was gaining statewide recognition, life threw him a challenge that tested not just his legal knowledge but his personal strength. One evening, after a long day of teaching and meetings, Isaiah received a call that his mother was in the hospital following a sudden health crisis. The news hit him like a wave. His mother, who had been his rock through every battle, was now vulnerable. Isaiah rushed to the hospital, his mind racing with worry and fear. As he sat by her bedside, he realized that his fight for justice extended beyond courtrooms and classrooms. It was about family, sacrifice, and resilience in the face of uncertainty. The hospital stay was longer than expected, and Isaiah found himself juggling his activism, schoolwork, and his mother's care. The strain was intense, but he refused to let any part of his mission slip. In the quiet moments, he reflected on the lessons he'd learned about strength and vulnerability. His mother, even weakened, encouraged him to keep pushing forward. "You're meant to change the world," she whispered one evening. "But don't forget to take care of yourself, too." Those words stayed with Isaiah as he balanced late-night study sessions with visits to the hospital. His friends from Know Your Power stepped up, running workshops and managing events in his absence. Marcus and Jenny checked in regularly, offering support and reminding Isaiah that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness. The experience deepened Isaiah's understanding of sacrifice and community. It wasn't just about standing tall alone. It was about leaning on others and building a network of care. Through this personal trial, Isaiah began incorporating new lessons into Know Your Power, emphasizing self-care and mental health alongside legal education. He wanted young people to know that fighting for justice required strength in every form, emotional, physical, and mental. Meanwhile, his mother's condition slowly improved, and Isaiah was able to breathe easier. The crisis had strengthened their bond and given Isaiah a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that the fight for justice wasn't separate from the fight for family and well-being, they were intertwined. As his mother recovered, Isaiah returned full force to his activism. He organized a community event called Justice and Wellness, bringing together legal experts, counselors, and youth to discuss how to navigate the pressures of activism without burning out. The event was a success, sparking important conversations and new initiatives. Isaiah's personal test had become a catalyst for growth, not just for himself but for the entire movement. In the months that followed, Isaiah found balance in his life, continuing his education, leading Know Your Power, and nurturing his family relationships. He understood now that true strength came from acknowledging challenges and embracing support. The journey wasn't easy, but Isaiah's resolve was stronger than ever. His mother's words echoed in his mind, "Change the world, but take care of yourself too." With that wisdom guiding him, Isaiah looked ahead, ready for whatever battles lay ahead, knowing he didn't have to face them alone. As Isaiah continued to build Know Your Power and navigate his personal challenges, an unexpected opportunity arrived in the form of an unlikely ally, Judge Franklin, the same judge who had once laughed at him. The judge's initial outreach had sparked curiosity, but Isaiah remained cautious, unsure of the judge's true intentions. One afternoon, Isaiah received a formal invitation to meet at the courthouse again, this time to discuss a new initiative the judge was proposing, an advisory council for youth justice reform that would include young leaders like Isaiah. Isaiah saw this as a chance to push the boundaries of what he thought possible. When he entered the courtroom for their meeting, Judge Franklin was waiting with a respectful nod. The judge admitted his past mistakes, acknowledging that he had underestimated Isaiah and many young people before. He explained that years on the bench had shown him flaws in the system, especially regarding how youth were treated, and he wanted to help make changes. Isaiah listened carefully, weighing the sincerity behind the judge's words. The conversation was honest, at times uncomfortable, but ultimately productive. They discussed strategies to reduce juvenile incarceration, improve legal education in schools, and create mentorship programs linking judges, lawyers, and youth advocates. Judge Franklin surprised Isaiah by volunteering to speak at Know Your Power events and offer insights into the judicial system. This partnership wasn't about erasing the past but about building bridges for the future. Isaiah accepted the judge's offer with cautious optimism. He knew change required collaboration, even with those who had once been obstacles. The advisory council formed quickly, bringing together activists, educators, legal professionals, and youth leaders. The group tackled difficult issues, school-to-prison pipelines, racial bias in sentencing, and access to legal resources. Isaiah emerged as a key voice, pushing for transparency and accountability. The judge's presence gave the council a level of legitimacy that opened doors otherwise closed. They lobbied lawmakers, hosted public forums, and developed pilot programs in juvenile courts. The progress was slow but tangible. Isaiah saw firsthand how cooperation between generations and perspectives could create momentum for reform. Yet, not everyone welcomed the alliance. Some activists accused Isaiah of compromising by working with the very system that had marginalized him. Others questioned whether the judge's change of heart was genuine or strategic. Isaiah grappled with these critiques, understanding the complexity of justice work. He realized that transformation wasn't about perfect purity but pragmatic progress. Throughout this period, Isaiah continued to mentor youth, sharing stories about navigating skepticism and building unlikely partnerships. He emphasized the importance of maintaining one's principles while engaging with the system to make change from within. As Know Your Power expanded its reach, Isaiah also began exploring opportunities beyond his city. Invitations to speak at national conferences and collaborate with youth leaders across the country came in. He realized his story resonated far beyond his own community, inspiring others to believe in the power of youth advocacy. The alliance with Judge Franklin became a symbol of that broader potential, a testament to the possibility of redemption and progress even in unexpected places. Isaiah often reflected on how far he'd come from the courtroom where the judge had once laughed at him. That laughter had sparked a journey of resilience, education, and ultimately, partnership. He understood now that justice was not a fixed destination but a continuous process, one that required courage, dialogue, and the willingness to confront both history and hope. With this new ally beside him, Isaiah felt ready to face the next chapter in his fight for fairness, knowing that even those who had doubted him could become part of the movement for change. The success of Know Your Power had brought Isaiah and his movement into many classrooms and community centers, but one of the toughest battles awaited him at the school board meeting. The district was considering a proposal to officially adopt Isaiah's legal education curriculum, a step that would legitimize and expand the program's reach. The meeting was packed, with supporters on one side and skeptics on the other. Opponents argued that teaching legal rights to students could lead to disrespect for authority or promote activism that some found uncomfortable. Parents, teachers, and local officials debated fiercely. Isaiah arrived early, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline mixed with responsibility. He knew this vote could make or break the future of Know Your Power in schools. When his turn came to speak, Isaiah stood confidently before the board and the crowd. He shared stories from students who had been empowered by the program, kids who'd learned to advocate for themselves, who'd avoided legal trouble by knowing their rights, who'd discovered their potential to shape their communities. He addressed concerns directly, explaining that the curriculum was about education and empowerment, not rebellion. Isaiah's words struck a chord with many in the room, but the opposition remained vocal. Tensions escalated as board members questioned the program's content and goals. The vote was delayed to allow further review, a setback that frustrated Isaiah and his supporters. Determined, Isaiah and his team organized community forums to educate parents and stakeholders about the program's benefits. They brought in legal experts, educators, and youth leaders to speak candidly and answer questions. Slowly, the narrative began to shift. Support grew as more people understood that Know Your Power was about equipping students to navigate the real world safely and confidently. Months later, the school board reconvened. This time, the atmosphere was different, more open, more hopeful. Isaiah spoke again, this time with allies from the community standing beside him. The vote passed, approving the curriculum for implementation across the district. The victory was hard-won but sweet. It meant that thousands of students would gain knowledge and confidence that could change their lives. Yet Isaiah knew the work was just beginning. Implementing the program on a large scale required resources, training, and ongoing support. Isaiah and his team worked tirelessly to ensure quality and consistency, visiting schools to assist teachers and gather feedback. The program adapted to different communities, reflecting local needs and concerns. Through it all, Isaiah remained focused on the bigger picture, building a generation of informed, empowered youth ready to advocate for justice. The school board victory became a symbol of what perseverance, dialogue, and community engagement could achieve. Isaiah's journey from being laughed at in a courtroom to influencing education policy was a testament to resilience and vision. As he prepared for the next phase, Isaiah understood that every step forward required courage, collaboration, and an unwavering belief in the power of youth. The school board's approval of Know Your Power was a milestone, but it also intensified opposition from some corners of the community. Isaiah soon found himself confronting a backlash more personal and aggressive than before. Critics questioned his motives and background, some resorting to racial stereotypes and misinformation to undermine his work. Social media became a battleground, with anonymous attacks targeting Isaiah and members of his movement. Even some local officials expressed discomfort with the changes happening in their schools, calling the program too radical or divisive. Isaiah felt the weight of this resistance deeply. It was a reminder that progress often provoked fear and discomfort. Instead of retreating, Isaiah chose to face the backlash head-on. He organized open forums where critics and supporters could come together to discuss their concerns in a respectful setting. Isaiah believed that dialogue, even difficult and uncomfortable, was essential to breaking down barriers and building understanding. At one such forum, an older teacher challenged Isaiah, asking if the program might encourage students to disrespect authority figures. Isaiah responded with calm conviction, explaining that Know Your Power was about respect grounded in knowledge, not blind obedience or defiance. He shared stories of students who had used what they learned to peacefully resolve conflicts and advocate for positive change. The forum was tense but productive. Some participants left with a new perspective, while others remained skeptical. Isaiah knew that changing minds took time and persistence. Beyond public forums, Isaiah worked to strengthen the program internally. He provided teachers with additional training to handle sensitive topics and equipped students with tools to engage in constructive conversations. He emphasized empathy, critical thinking, and the importance of understanding multiple viewpoints. Isaiah also leaned on his support network, Marcus, Jenny, Elena, and his family, who helped him navigate the emotional toll of backlash. Their encouragement reminded him why he started this journey. In private moments, Isaiah reflected on the judge who once laughed at him, recognizing that prejudice and misunderstanding were deeply ingrained challenges. But he was also heartened by the growing community of young people empowered by Know Your Power. Their resilience and hope fueled his resolve. One evening, after a particularly harsh online attack, Isaiah posted a message that went viral: "Change is uncomfortable, but necessary. If we stop listening now, we stop growing. Let's have the courage to talk, to learn, and to move forward together. The post sparked a wave of support, reminding Isaiah that he was not alone. The backlash was fierce, but so was the movement. Isaiah's story was no longer just his own, it belonged to everyone fighting for justice, respect, and equality. Facing backlash had tested his spirit, but it also strengthened it, preparing him for the battles still ahead. As Isaiah's influence grew, so did the stakes. The next test of his resolve came unexpectedly when a high-profile case involving youth justice erupted in the media. A local teenager, Malik Thompson, was arrested on charges many believed were unjust and fueled by racial bias. The community was divided, emotions ran high, and the spotlight turned to Isaiah as a leading voice for youth empowerment and justice reform. Malik's case became a rallying point for activists, and Know Your Power was at the center of the movement demanding transparency and fairness. Isaiah was invited to speak at press conferences, community meetings, and even the courthouse steps. The pressure was immense, every word he spoke could influence public opinion and potentially the legal proceedings. Behind the scenes, Isaiah worked closely with Malik's family and legal team, offering support and sharing his expertise. He helped organize workshops to educate the community about their rights and the importance of due process. Malik's case exposed the systemic flaws Isaiah had long fought against: police misconduct, inadequate legal representation, and judicial bias. Isaiah's advocacy underscored the urgent need for reforms, highlighting how youth of color disproportionately faced harsh treatment. The media coverage intensified, and Isaiah found himself navigating a complex web of hope, fear, anger, and expectation. The community's energy was palpable, a mix of determination and anxiety. Isaiah's leadership was both praised and scrutinized. Some questioned whether he was overstepping, while others hailed him as a hero. Throughout the ordeal, Isaiah remained grounded, drawing strength from his family, friends, and the lessons learned from every challenge he had faced. He reminded himself and others that the goal was justice, not victory for any one person or group. The climax of the case came in court, where Malik's defense team presented compelling evidence of procedural errors and bias. Isaiah attended every hearing, supporting Malik and advocating for fairness. The judge, under public and legal pressure, agreed to review the case carefully. The community held its breath. After weeks of deliberation, the charges against Malik were dropped. The decision was a moment of triumph but also a reminder of the work still to be done. Isaiah used this victory to push for broader policy changes, including better legal representation for youth and reforms to reduce racial disparities in the justice system. Malik's case became a symbol of the movement's impact, showing how knowledge, advocacy, and community action could lead to real change. Isaiah reflected on his journey, from the courtroom where a judge laughed at him, to standing alongside a community fighting for justice. The final challenge had tested every ounce of his courage, skill, and resilience. It was proof that the fight was far from over, but progress was possible when people came together with purpose and hope. The victory in Malik's case marked not an end but a new beginning for Isaiah and the movement he had built. As the dust settled, Isaiah found himself reflecting deeply on everything that had brought him to this point: the laughter, the struggles, the victories, and the losses. He realized that justice was not merely a legal concept but a living, breathing force shaped by love, sacrifice, and connection. In the months following, Isaiah dedicated himself not only to expanding Know Your Power but also to nurturing his relationships with family and friends, understanding that true strength came from a balance of passion and care. His mother's health was fully restored, and their bond had grown even stronger through adversity. Isaiah recognized the sacrifices his family had made and made a promise to honor them by continuing the work with humility and gratitude. At a public forum celebrating the program's growth, Isaiah shared his closing thoughts with a crowd of students, educators, and community members. He spoke candidly about the importance of perseverance in the face of doubt, the power of education, and the need for empathy in every fight for justice. Life is full of surprises, he said, but love will always lead the way. Justice without love is empty, and love without action is powerless. We have to hold both in our hearts if we want to build a better world. Isaiah's words resonated deeply, inspiring many to continue their own journeys toward empowerment and change. He emphasized that everyone, no matter their background, had the potential to make a difference, reminding the audience that his story began with a judge's laughter but became a story of courage, growth, and hope. As Know Your Power expanded beyond the state, Isaiah began mentoring a new generation of youth leaders, passing on the lessons he had learned about resilience, collaboration, and the importance of standing firm in one's values. The movement grew into a network of advocates across the country, united by a shared vision of justice and equality. Isaiah's own path was just beginning. Law school, advocacy, and perhaps one day, a role within the justice system where he could enact change from within. Yet he never forgot where he started or the power of community that had carried him through. Looking back, Isaiah understood that the judge's laughter was never meant to diminish him but to challenge him. And he had risen, not just as a legal prodigy but as a leader who embodied hope, courage, and the transformative power of love. The journey had been long and difficult, marked by moments of doubt and triumph alike. But in the end, Isaiah's story was a testament to the strength found in embracing one's identity, standing up for what is right, and believing that even the smallest voice can echo loudly enough to change the world. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?